Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I was going to put together a two-part episode for you. The first part was going to be all about me heading down to Portland to cover the Rockstar Energy Open. This is a true open event, which means that this is one of the few contests where an unknown can make a name for themselves. And the Rockstar crew? Well, they built an insane course at Tom McCall Waterfront Park in Portland, and I was psyched to meet up and chat with folks like Chris Joslin, Olympic gold medalist Keegan Palmer, Powell Movement alum and Olympic medalist Tom Shar, among others. But it wasn't meant to be. With getting home from vacation, 20 hours at the doctor's this week, and all the shit I have to do around the house, working on the podcast, and a whole bunch of new info that I haven't shared yet, I really couldn't get away, which was a bummer, because events like these are what make me feel like I have a normal life for a couple of days. But whatever, I didn't get to do the first part of the podcast as planned, but the second part of the podcast is something that I absolutely love doing, putting out the best of Inappropriate Questions. I did this 2 years ago, and the initial thought was, I can put out a best of episode and it'll give me a week off of podcasting. I wouldn't have to line up and research an interview and it would make life super easy. But I was totally wrong. Doing these best of episodes takes so much work. It requires me to go back into the archive and listen to all of the inappropriate questions and then pull the best of them. So I picked back up where I left off in 2022 and went through over a year's worth of inappropriate questions to find the best questions and answers for us to relive. Before I do that, I want to thank you for continuing to listen and thank you for telling your friends about the show. And finally, I need to thank my sponsors for making this thing happen. As you know, I only work with the best brands, and they are Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Liquid Force. Now, it's time to get into the best of Inappropriate Questions. I'm going to start out this best of episode with a set of podcasters. Both Chris Grenier and E. Stone have been guests of the Powell Movement. And when E. Stone came on the podcast, I made sure to give Grenier the opportunity to ask inappropriate questions to E. Stone. And while these two incredible podcast hosts have broken up, what they created with the bomb hole was incredible. And in classic Powell Movement fashion, this whole deal starts out with a great poop story.
First one I got to ask is, what happened in the Poland train tunnel when you guys were filming for Tech 9?
He just loves this story.
Okay.
Loves this story. I was on a trip to Poland, kind of a strike mission. We left a trade show out in Europe with some of the Tech 9 team riders like Dylan Thompson and Lucas Magoon. And when you're in a flat city like we were in Poland, there's like classic places to go to shoot where you can find rails. And they're like riverbanks as well as train tunnels, because they always build the train tunnel like up on a hill. They build almost a fake hill with a rail down it at every train tunnel. So you always find yourself shooting at these train tunnels. And they're kind of you're not supposed to be there. It's against the law. It's kind of a sketchy place to be hanging out. So there's obviously no bathrooms around. You're in these countries. You're eating really weird food that you're not used to. You're out all hours of the day. So I had to take a shit super bad.
Mm-hmm.
The only place to go to take a shit where you can't be seen is in the train tunnel. So I told Cole, who I was standing next to shooting, he's the main dude at FODT and the Tech 9 TM and designer, Cole Taylor. I told him I got to go to the bathroom. He sees me run into the tunnel. And then a couple minutes later, the train's coming and the horn's going. And Cole hadn't seen me come out of the tunnel. I went in there and took a shit leaning up against the wall, but I heard the train coming and ran out the other side. Cole thought the train took me out because he thought the tunnel was too long for me to get out from the other side. So I took a shit in the tunnel and Cole thought I died. That's pretty much what happened.
That would be a shitty way to die.
Yes, it would.
Did you have toilet paper?
Man, when you're out there in the streets like that, you should always keep toilet paper. But if you don't, there's some moves that you can use. And I used to you rip a sleeve off your shirt if you have to. Maybe lose a sock if you have to. I think I've seen someone use a beanie once. But I think that day I had toilet paper.
All right, cool. We'll jump into question number 2.
Question number 2 is, What happens when you're on a trip and your board bag doesn't show up, but you still need to be in the streets to shoot photos and you got to keep your feet dry? And the part 2 of that question is, what's the appropriate amount of trash inside the rental van while you're on a trip?
The appropriate amount of trash in the van, there's never enough trash in the van. And I think anybody on a road trip will realize that, because on a street trip, you're driving around pretty much 24/7. You're stopping at every convenience store that you pass and every coffee stop. So you end up with so much trash. Why bother taking it out of there every day? Why not just let it pile up to your knees? That's the appropriate amount of trash. What was his other question?
Socks.
Yeah. I went on a trip to Helsinki, and I got there, and I think the crew was there a day before me. So they picked me up at the airport and brought me right to the session. And sure enough, my luggage didn't show up. So I grabbed 2 garbage bags from the airport and just put them over my feet and went out and shot in my shoes in like a foot of snow. I was definitely cold, but they stayed dry and I was able to get photos that day.
So some fun questions from Chris, and what a bummer that the bomb hole has changed. After E. Stone wasn't on the show for a few months, he came out and discussed his problems with substance abuse very publicly, and that helped explain why he was no longer a part of the show. And while there was hope that he would reunite with Chris and be back on the bomb hole for a while, then there was silence. Then E. Stone spoke up about his problems and shared them with the world, and I'm not really sure if Chris ever commented on them publicly. But at the end of the day, E. Stone started his own show, and it went on for a few months, and I'm not sure what the status of that is today. Chris continues to put out the bomb hole, and while I'm sure it's still awesome, from all the comments I read and the things that I hear, the show is completely different without the chemistry between the two of them. Being that Chris has been sober for a long time, I'm not shocked by the split. But it sucks for listeners and it sucks for fans. So it was nice to get the two of them back together on the show, even if it was a recording from 2 years ago. The next question I have comes from the star of the award-winning Full Circle movie and a dude known for landing a sit-ski double backy in the backcountry in the exact same spot where he injured himself. Trevor Kennison is a good friend and a badass athlete, and he's got no fear, and he came on the show to ask Michelle Parker a question, and then I jump in with a question of my own.
My question is for Michelle. You know, I heard back in the day, you could roll a pretty good doobie. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm an ace at rolling doobies, that's for sure. Sorry, Mom.
Do you even partake in cannabis anymore?
I like a gummy at night before bed, but that's it.
But back in the day, there was a crew of people that were a traveling group of smoke, it seemed like, and you could have been part of that. Maybe, maybe not. Would that be accurate?
Here and there, for sure, I partook.
And then one other thing that I'm going to bring up. I remember picking you up from the airport once. I don't know when it was, but we were having a conversation about microdosing, and it was before anyone had ever really talked about it that much, and it wasn't being done that much because mushrooms back then were really frowned on, and any hallucinogens back then because it's like a decade ago. But did you ever do that, and did that ever help you out?
Yeah, I think we need to be really open to these methods of healings. There's like incredible studies going on right now showing the benefits of it. And yeah, I think, it's really interesting. I would say study up yourself, but that stuff's always been fascinating to me.
So that was the last answer from Michelle Parker, and we were supposed to do a 2-part podcast. And while I have hounded her to record again, I get it. She has so much shit going on. And you know what? We will record a part 2 one of these days. I'm just not sure when. Next up, I go to Bruce Edgerly. Edge is one of the founders of BCA, and when he sold BCA to Jardin, he made a lot of money. At least that's what he said in our podcast. And in an industry where most people get bent over and screwed, Bruce won, and that's awesome, and I love to hear a story like that, so I was stoked for Edge. But really, the important part of Edge is what he created with BCA and how many lives that they've saved. Although we'll never really know the true number, the work that all the folks at BCA have done over the years is so important to the snow industry, and we can't thank them enough. But I was able to thank Edge with some raunchy, inappropriate questions. Well, they're not really that raunchy, but maybe the answers are. I was able to get one of the best personalities and people in the snow business, Steve Christie, who also works with K2 Skate and the snowshoe and cross-country brands in that building, to ask Edge a couple of questions, and they do come out inappropriate, and I love the answers. Here we go with Christie.
All right, Bruce Edgerly, question number 1. I want you to think hard about this. Ample Annie,
Oh, God.
Ample Annie, is she a friend or a foe, and why?
All right, well, I hope my wife Karen isn't listening.
I hope so too.
Yeah, Steve, okay. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, so this was the first of several times that we've been threatened with lawsuits, I guess you'd say. We had a bachelor party when I got married in our warehouse. You know, we started in Bruno's garage, but a year or two later we moved into this warehouse building right next to the strip joint in North Boulder called the Bus Stop. And it's kind of a seedy part of town. You know, there was actually a search warrant on the floor when we moved in there. Boulder wasn't quite as bougie then as it is now. But anyways, we had my bachelor party, and it was organized by my buddy Mike Bader from the Boulder Outdoor Center Kayak School. And yeah, it involved some Crisco and some plastic sheeting on the floor and a couple of gals and some kind of game of Twister with me in the middle. And one of these gals was absolutely humongous. She probably weighed 300 pounds.
Oh, geez.
And she had boobs the size of melons, maybe watermelons. And it turned into a bit of a wrestling match. And the funny thing is, I already had a cut on my nose because earlier in the night, my brother had come in from Alaska and come in and just taken me down because wrestling is a big part of our whole family dynamic. I've got 3 older brothers. And he kind of got the best of me. I had a cut on my nose. And I got in this wrestling match with this Ample Annie, and she started getting the best of me. And, you know, I had learned a thing or two about wrestling from my brothers, and I did a reversal on her and threw her down her back. And, you know, my nose was bleeding at the time because it had opened up from the match I had with my brother earlier in the night. And it just got really kind of nasty. And she tweaked her ankle, and she got really pissed, and it turned into a bit of a fracas. And she left the building saying, "I'm going to see you in court." Yeah, so that was my bachelor party. And meanwhile, my friend Mike had taken a bunch of Hustler magazines and torn the photos out of the mags and just randomly stuck them into our files. You know, like REI and Neptune Mountaineering file and this and that. Backcountrystore.com is what it was called at the time. And we had just hired a new employee, our first employee, Tiffany Von Essen. Every once in a while, she'd go into the files to look up some kind of credit application or something, and out would come this full-on beaver shot from Hustler magazine. She would just like completely freak out and turn all red. And she actually quit a couple of weeks into the job because of this and several other things. And Bruno came in and salvaged the relationship, and she became a lifelong employee, actually. But yeah, that's the story of Ample Annie.
All right, we are going to jump into Steve's final inappropriate question.
All right, question number 3. Martin Franklin, the CEO or the owner of Jardin, came to purchase the company Backcountry Access for K2 Sports. You guys went up to Bruno's house and you deployed an airbag for him. In fact, he put the airbag on his body and deployed it. What came out of that airbag that day with, you know, the guy that's like on Forbes' top 100 richest people in the world list?
Yeah, that guy was a real jet setter. Let's see, on Valentine's Day one year, our production employees played a little trick on me. They went over to Fascinations, the local kind of sex toy store, and they bought a blow-up doll, you know, sex doll. And they put it in an airbag, and then they said, "Hey, we got this new prototype." And they pulled the trigger, and out comes this blow-up doll. It was freaking hilarious. And we ended up keeping that thing and deploying it strategically at events. One of them was when Martin Franklin, this billionaire Wall Street guy, came to take a look at our company when we were selling. So we told him, "Hey, this is our next generation float pack 3.0. We want you to be the first person to deploy it." So we took out our video cameras and started rolling the film, and he pulled the trigger, and out comes this blow-up doll. You know, the thing's right in his face. And he totally got off on it. So that's when we knew that we were actually a pretty good match. And we actually added a little clause to the sale contract when we sold it to K2, and that was that Martin Franklin was going to take us heli skiing for a week up at Miky heli-skiing in Canada, and he was going to fly us up there in that private jet. Unfortunately, Jordan was sold a year or two later, and the new people didn't know anything about that, so we never got to consummate that part of the deal. But yeah, we've had that blow-up doll. We've had several new iterations. We had one that I think you saw at a sales meeting once. We love our New Zealand distributors, so we pulled a prank on them, and that involved a blow-up sheep in net stockings. And who knows what the next generation airbag might hold.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Peter Glen Ski and Sports. While Peter Glen has been the place to get all of your ski and snowboard needs for over 60 years, they do so much more than that. If you're an inline skater, they have the best products from K2 and Rollerblade. If you like to wakeboard, surf, skate, or whatever, Peter Glen has you covered with the best gear from Liquid Force and others. And if you just need the most comfortable shoes on the planet, Peter Glen has all of the best from Hoka and on. No matter what your summer or winter needs are, Peter Glen has you covered. And if you can't shop in store, head on over to peterglensports.com, where you'll find all the brands at the best prices, free shipping on orders of over $50, and you'll have the comfort of knowing that returns are hassle-free with Peter Glen. So please support the show and buy your gear from the best, Peter Glen Ski and Sports. Next up, it's Liquid Force, a brand that's been supplying premium wake gear since 1995, and it's not just wakeboards these days. Think the best park, boat, surf, and foil boards, built with state-of-the-art materials and technology to make your day on the water easier, better, and more fun than ever before. From wakeboards to shapers to vests to handles to foils to surfers, whether you're a seasoned pro or just dipping your toes in, Liquid Force has you covered with gear that's not just equipment, it's a lifestyle. And if you want to live that lifestyle, I have a one-time purchase code for you to use on the Liquid Force website. I'm going to save you 15% on your entire purchase. All you need to do is head on over to liquidforce.com, go shopping. After you pick out your brand new TC Skim Wake Surfer or whatever you buy, enter the code POWELL15, that's all capital letters and numbers, no spaces at checkout, and you'll get that deal. My final sponsor this round is Outdoor Research. I've loved OR for a long time because they make the best, most waterproof, warmest outerwear in the world, and that's because it's engineered and tested right here in the miserable conditions that the Pacific Northwest can deliver. And there are so many more reasons to be into the brand. While everyone knows they make the best lightweight hiking pants ever built, their new line of high-performance mountain biking apparel has been getting rave reviews from bike media, and when I recently chatted with OR's newly minted X Games gold medalist Tom Van Steenbergen and his brother Bass, they couldn't stop talking about how they've never had better gear. And that's what I think every time I get an OR package. Wow, they really thought about every detail to make this work better for me. To make your gear work better for you, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out the brand new Freewheel collection and everything else on the OR site. They cut no corners and they have the best in style and function on the planet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Next up is a dude who is born to ask inappropriate questions. I could ask JT Holmes to create 3 questions for just about anyone, and he would have them ready in about 10 minutes. JT's that smart, witty, and he knows exactly what I'm looking for. He's also a pro athlete, a stuntman, and the most attractive man in Palisades, Tahoe, next to the person he's asking the questions to. A guy that JT has definitely seen naked, Connery Lundin.
Okay, Connery, I noticed, and I'm sure you guys probably talked about this in the podcast, but naked on the cover of Powder magazine. Iconic, excellent shot. My hat's off to you. Your clothes are off entirely. Just how often are you skiing naked? Is this something you're doing all the time, or is this kind of a special thing between you and Guy Fatale, and you guys, do it annually? Are you doing this when you're coaching the Party Beach ski camps? How often are you skiing naked?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Squaw and skiing naked is part of the NAR culture in Squallywood, and it's just part of the culture here. And yeah, I remember my first time seeing a naked skier was Shane. Was in Crested Butte flipping off some cliff naked, and I was like, dude, that was so cool. And I'd always had this dream to get a naked powder shot. I'd never seen one, and I understood why it never happened, because it's fucking cold.
Right.
But we were in Canada on a cat skiing trip, and the snow was not very good. We didn't have great light. Spirits were down, and I was like, well, screw it. Like, there's going to be a warm cat at the bottom. Let's do one run and see what happens. and we managed to, in one run, get a couple sweet shots. But I've done a lot of naked skiing before that and after that. Skiing naked is fun and funny.
Are there other people that you ski with that ski naked as well? Like, have you seen a lot of other naked skiers? I mean, really what I'm getting towards is, what naked skier has the biggest dick?
I would say none of them. Because if it's cold out, then you're not doing it for your ego. Let's just say that.
I guess Connery hasn't seen the porno Naked Skiers with Big Dicks. But that's okay. I haven't seen it either. I rented Pinocchio. It's not his nose that grows instead. But I love that there's guys out there like Connery who keep the spirit of McConkie alive. And that's not all Connery does. He's a badass in his own right on the mountain. I will say that I love following up dick stories with shit stories, and that's what I'm going to do right here. And Todd Ligare asked Drew Petersen a Powell Movement inspired question.
I'm kind of curious, with all your time doing long missions, running, and of course skiing as well, especially for someone who has the highest pancake intake of anyone I've ever met. If you had a scenario on the trail where you've encountered needing to deal with, I don't know, maybe an unfortunate bathroom break, or what's the worst story you have from an unfortunate moment on long missions?
So I think he's asking if you've ever shit your pants running.
No, I've never shit my pants because I'm a trail runner, so I just shit in the woods.
Okay. What's the biggest emergency you've had?
I'd say on the ski side, the greatest poop I've ever had was when Adam Clark and I were skiing Gannett Peak in Wyoming. It was a 50-mile round trip to go ski that. And on our summit day, it was like right after sunrise, and just had to, take a poop on the glacier in the middle of June. This is probably the best one on the ski side. And then on the running side, they sneak up like way quicker on the running side.
Just because you're dripping sweat and it just got to happen right then?
Yeah, exactly, man. So you start to get really good at like picking out the right leaves, or mushrooms are actually really good toilet paper.
Huh. All right. So you wipe your ass with mushrooms. I eat them, but whatever. So there was Drew Petersen laughing as he talks about shitting in the wild. But Drew's life hasn't all been about laughter. While his life and times have been defined by success in the mountains, that success didn't shield Drew from mental health issues. And in a world where we once were afraid to talk about issues like this, Drew has made a point to continue to share his story and keep mental health in the conversation. His new movie, Feel It All, should be out as you listen to this podcast. And based on Drew's work ethic and attention to detail, you can bet this will be worth watching, and you can also bet it's going to be heavy. But heavy is not what Inappropriate Questions are all about. They're about funny stories, and here's a fun one that I should have been a part of, but I wasn't. It's a long story that involves a K2 sales meeting, and I'm going to let Mark Fankhauser's question to former ride art director Mike Styskal describe what I heard was the highlight of the sales meeting.
So this was winter sales meeting, 2004, Whistler. Can you tell me a bit about that night? Everybody seems to have a different story about that night, but can you tell me a little bit about that night? And also, what purpose empty Budweiser bottles served during that event, besides being smashed and stacked into a pile under Runkey's table?
So this is the gala, and everyone in K2 was invited but the skate group. So me and my skate group had to sit back in Seattle when the company-wide gala was going on, and I was so pissed when that happened. I was like, how can you call that a fucking company-wide gala and send 20 emails about how great this is going to be and not invite like everybody. 4 people? And then there was this bottles under Runkey's table. What do you remember about that? Because it was a crazy night from what I heard, because everybody's got a story about it.
Man, I tell you, before I was asked to do this podcast, I was trying to figure out what really happened that night in the back of my head in case this question came up. And I got to say, I don't remember it all. I just remember there was a lot of pre-drinking and drinking that we brought in ourselves into the event that had plenty of liquor at, because we couldn't get drinks during the ceremony situation. We decided, well, fuck, this is great. We can just drink back here. And we did. And we drank and we drank. And Runkey and I got shithouse drunk. He had a Jack bottle, if I remember right. We had a shit ton of long neck Budweisers. And I just remember at one point, something got thrown, or it got slid across the floor. The Jack bottle went sliding across the concrete, ding, 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 over to the next table, which is ours. And we were sharing the bottle back and forth because we had beers underneath the table. Somehow, during a quiet part of the ceremony, somebody under that table bumped those Budweiser bottles and they all went tink, tink, tink. Like you were snuck a beer into a theater and he tipped it over and you were like, oh, dude, there it goes. It's rolling down all the way to the front. And the next thing I remember was Robert's arm on my shoulder stating, can you guys just knock it off back here?
And he's the head of the whole company.
Yes. Robert's footing the bill for this entire thing, not out of the company's budget.
But he's letting you know that he's paying the bill.
He's letting me know, and Robert and I are really good friends. We still are good friends. We always will be good friends. But he was just letting me know that I was just getting ready to cross over the line. And that you probably better not go any further with the antics that are going on.
So that was Styk about to cross the line, and back in the day, that dude liked to party. But he made a change with his life and is alcohol-free these days, and he seems to be kicking ass with it, which is awesome. My next question goes to a guy who also quit drinking. Peter Line is a legend in the snowboard world, and a legend that lives near me. I saw him once while I was walking my dog, and he was working on relaunching his Forum project, and I was like, dude, we should do a part 2 of the podcast, talk about Forum and everything that's gone on in the past few years since we podcasted last. Peter was down. And when it came for me to come up with inappropriate questions, I went to Santa Cruz skateboard test engineer and former snowboard pro and snowboard engineer, Sean Tedore, to come up with a question that Peter Line would like.
Hey, Pete, what's up? I've known you for a long time, and I got a lot of questions for you, but here's a couple just to get you going. When snowboarding and Forum was at its peak during the X Games and MTV days, I remember you and the crew were always hanging out in LA and Hollywood, usually with high-profile people. Can you tell me about one of the craziest celebrity encounters? Who was the celeb and what happened?
Sean loves the celebrity stories, that's for sure. He likes being in the mix. He's got a lot of foam. So about my past, I believe, with all that, to where I'm always fairly chill and he kind of like gets discouraged. Like, dude, you totally could have like gone whatever, to some celebrity or something like that. I mean, we definitely hung out in LA. Nothing too crazy. I can give you a quick little rundown of some shit. Like, or one time going to Edward Furlong's house from Terminator.
Oh, yeah.
This is past his prime when he's just kind of the drunk kid at the clubs or whatever. And went there with Danny Minnick, who's now kind of a big-time painter, friend of mine, artist. And it was just kind of like, everyone's going to his house, cool, hanging around, whatever, don't really know anybody except for a couple people. And just kind of looking through his CDs and game collection, like, oh, shit, he's got X Games snowboarding game with me on it. It's like, oh, all right, cool. Robin Williams knew who I was. I saw him at Fred Siegel one time. I would kind of walk out, and Robin Williams points at me. He's like, oh, there he is. And I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, yeah, thank you for making cool snowboard apparel and stuff. I ride Foursquare, and started talking with Robin Williams for probably a good 10 minutes. And Tara Takias was there also. It's pretty awesome. Lots of times seeing like Heath Ledger, so seeing some of the greats when they were younger before they passed.
And do any of these people, like you said, Robin Williams knew who you were, but are there any other celebrities that are like, holy shit, it's Peter Line?
I don't recall.
Okay, we'll just say there was a ton of them, but you were drinking and you don't remember.
Of course. I mean, there's always ones where like Beats by Dre, Dr. Dre, his wife, and their kids snowboard and stuff like that. So I heard that their kids knew who I was and his wife knew who I was. And these are pretty sad celebrity stories, to tell you the truth. I don't know. Like, I never hooked up with any famous people or anything like that. No famous models or anything.
Well, that's another question that we're going to get to.
Puffy's entourage pushed me off the dance floor. I think they also pushed Tony Hawk off the dance floor when Puffy walked in one time. Pretty funny, because I think Tony Hawk was probably richer than he was at the time. It was just kind of just funny shit. Mos Def is super, super nice. Chat with him for a brief time. Yeah, I don't know. There's just like all just kind of weird small ones like that where you kind of meet somebody. Because it's easy for like a friend to go up to a celebrity they kind of met a few times and then introduce a famous snowboarder. So I've gotten introduced to a number of people, and they're all usually pretty cool, pretty chill.
So while Tedore always wants to know about celebrities, another one of my former coworkers, Chris McCullough, who's the VP of growth over at Overdose Digital, a company that's killing it, and that's a bad joke referring to their name. But Chris loves the race world, And he's a good friend of Olympian Steven Nyman. So when it was time to get someone to ask inappropriate questions for Steven, I knew Chris would have an educated race question, and here's what he came up with.
Steven, what's up, buddy? I'm glad you and Powell are talking. All right, so here's your first question for you. So globally, it's no secret that the World Cup, or the White Circus, as it's commonly referred, is far bigger in Europe than North America. And I know they got rowdy fans and iconic après bars. So I want you to tell the people about the craziest post-race night out you've had following the World Cup.
All right, so we want to find out the ex-Mormon's craziest post-race World Cup night.
Which one?
The craziest one.
I mean, there's the Londoner in Kitzbühel's pretty iconic. And I got behind the bar there one year, which was pretty fun. And they're just filling pitchers full of, you basically just slam a pitcher in somebody's face and then pound one and giving them one. That was fun. But the Louisville Keller is a lot of fun in Gardena. And I was there. I can't remember what year it was, but the ceiling's pretty low there. And they have these beers called the Octo beers. And it's 8 tubes coming out of this massive stein. And you basically just hammer it down as fast as you can, 8 people at the same time. And there's a lot of bubbles behind it and a lot of puke. And anyway, I was dancing with this girl a little later that night, and I forgot how low the ceilings were, and I just like threw her straight up into the ceiling. I probably concussed her pretty good. But the fun nights were before cell phones came out. I'll just say that.
I can't even imagine what an Octo beer would be like, and it's really hard to remember what it was like partying before cell phones. I mean, back then, it was like anything goes, and there's no record of any of the antics. The only way someone could be canceled was to do something absolutely awful. These days, everyone behaves a lot more PC, and part of that reason is because you never know who's watching or recording you. And my next questions, well, they come from those no camera days. They come from a time that'll be looked at as the golden age of the new school movement of skiing. And Glen Mittendorfer was right in the middle of it. He wasn't the biggest name in skiing, but he was an OG who lived with Nema Vitamin founder and legendary pro skier and sales rep Josh Loubek, and Glen comes in with a couple of good inappropriate questions.
I'd love to hear the incident of a toothbrush with Shane Zox in Aspen, and I'd love to hear some details.
All right, there was a chuckle on your end. I think you know what he's talking about.
I do, man. It was before I got married. I'm since divorced, but they did a little prank on me for a bachelor party, and we were in Aspen, and they took my toothbrush and took photos with my toothbrush all over the place in the X Games, including, I think, in an inappropriate body part from Shane Zox. So that was a little gross.
Oh, man, that is disgusting. That's terrible, but funny, I guess, when you saw the pictures, or at least really funny for everybody else. Let's jump into question number 2.
When you and I were living together, I'd love to hear about the incident of you falling naked out of the loft.
I roomed with Glenn, and I was, getting out of the loft to go to the bathroom or something like that. I leaned back, broke the railing, fell down completely like 10 feet onto the ground. And it was ridiculous. I mean, just classic times. Again, I'm so thankful that I am straight edge. I don't drink. None of that stuff. But that was the good old days.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Elan Skis. I've been skiing on Elan, the Ripstick and the Playmaker, for the past 3 seasons. And when I first started doing ads for Elan, I would rave about the quality of the skis because you really can see a difference in the fit and finish from an Elan compared to every other ski on the wall. I'd always attribute that to Elan having the best factory in skiing, their heritage in building spare no-expense yachts, and having real skiers build the skis in the Slovenian Alps. That combination has created lively, playful skis that remain rock solid underfoot at high speeds and have really made me feel like I'm a better skier. And while it's not ski season, when it is, if you demo skis before you buy them, please support me in what I do and try an Elan, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. If you buy skis without the test drive, trust me, and head on over to elanskis.com to see all the choices, and you're going to have more fun on the mountain than you ever have before next season. Next up, it's Best Day Brewing. And while I love a cold beer, I don't always need the alcohol. And that's where Best Day comes into play. It's brewed with people like you and me in mind. The skiers, the snowboarders, the skaters, the bikers, the runners, the gym rats, the bladers, the surfers. Anyone who loves parking lot beers, tailgate beers, studio beers, workshop beers, you get the idea. Best Day is the best way to celebrate your best days and not to have to worry about the drive home or a lot of calories or anything else for that matter. While I'm not saying don't drink alcohol, there's a time and a place for everything. When it's doing time, I like to drink Best Day straight up. But when it's drinking time, I like to mix in a Best Day between every alcoholic drink to keep me sharp and in control. It's a cheat code for all-night fun. To find out more about the Best Day flavors and buy some, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com or pick some up over on Amazon. My final sponsor is the brand that has created the most incredible pint glass in the history of the world. I'm talking about Stanley. Yes, that brand that makes your grandfather's favorite green coffee mug. It's also the brand that's front and center in the life and times of pop icon Olivia Rodrigo, and a brand that I'm proud to say has been supporting the outdoors and the sports we love since before the other copycat brands existed. Stanley invented the category of keeping things hot and cold in 1913, and while their quenchers have taken over the world by storm, I personally swear by their adventure stacking pint beer glasses, and have used them almost every day for the past 7 years. No joke. I also love all their choices of food jars and storage items for parking lot fare at the mountain or during my 1 day a year at Wild Waves, which is coming up. To see all the products from Stanley, the brand that everyone's talking about these days, but I've been talking about for over 7 years, head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Next up on the Inappropriate Questions train is Adam Yu, and I visited Adam at one of the heaviest times of his life. He was in Japan on a trip with Kyle Smain about a month before we sat down and chatted, and both he and Kyle were buried in an avalanche. Unfortunately, Kyle didn't survive that tragic day, and that's really, really sad and a whole nother podcast in itself. But Adam did survive, and we had a heavy 2-part podcast where we talked about it and a lot of other things. And in part 1 of that podcast, I was sent some inappropriate questions from anonymous sources, and in his first round of IQs, we touch on capitalism and groupies, and then in Adam's second round of inappropriate questions, K2 Outdoors Steve Christie comes back with some new inappropriate questions, and we get a great Jerry Garcia story from Adam. First, what do these brands have in common? K2, Atomic, Arcade Belts, Tubbs Snowshoes, TGR, Smartwool, Burton, The North Face, Buff, Sanuk, Stance, and 686.
Honestly, I have no idea.
That's great. I'm going to tell you, they have all had Grateful Dead collaborations. What are your thoughts on the cashing in on your hometown band?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I've actually been thinking about that a lot recently because I see 686 stuff, or 686, however you pronounce it. And Pat McCarthy, Sarge, he's a buddy. Like, he's one of my homies. But I see that all over the mountain now. You know, I saw the Atomic stuff, Ben Shetler stuff, which, I mean, hey, Grateful Dead's awesome. And they're, you know, one of my favorite bands of all time. Jerry Garcia is my number one guitar influence. If they want to cash in, that's fine with me. Like, I was lucky enough to see the Dead a couple times at the tail end, and no amount of cashing in or selling out, if you will change what that music means to me. It makes me wonder now when I see someone wearing, you know, Dead shirt or whatever, like, do they even know anything about this band or, you know, what it means to me? But it doesn't matter. It means to me what it means to me. If someone wants to wear it because they think it's cool, that's fine too. If they think it's edgy or hip or retro or whatever, like, that's fine. It's kind of like Kiss. They went on lunch boxes and all the things.
But it's just so unique that one brand or band has so many collaborations in the past 24 months almost. I mean, these aren't all in the past 24 months, but most of them are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they need money. It seems like they probably have quite a bit of it, or at least they had. But I haven't bought a single Grateful Dead thing. I mean, aside from some, you know, books. I bought Phil's book a few years back, or I bought Billy's book a few years back. You know, I like reading up on the musical history and stuff like that, but I'm not going to buy like some Dakine backpack with a lightning bolt on it. Like, I don't need that. The music means what it means to me. And if they need to make money or whatever, it seems like it's more power to them at this point.
All right. Well, we are going to go into your final inappropriate question. And you've been in bands. You are about to have a band practice right now. People are about to show up at your house, or they've already started showing up. And what's the most groupie thing that you've seen, either with your own eyes in music, in skiing, or biology?
Oh man, well they all have their moments. I mean, it's pretty funny. I'll go to a marine biology conference and I'm still pretty much a nobody in this scene, but you'll get some heavy hitting PhDs or, head honchos of a lab, and they're usually like some old male, pale, stale type of person, but you'll get these starry eyed, usually little co-eds. Oh, I'd do anything to see a dolphin. Oh, well, why don't you come back to my hotel room and I'll tell you all about this PhD program I have for you.
Yeah.
I've seen some pretty slimeball moves like that from my marine science land. In the ski world, I mean, I wouldn't say I've had any sort of personal experience. I mean, I've traveled around the world and sometimes I've been single and sometimes I haven't. And when I have been single, I've had fun. And when I haven't been single, I've looked from afar type of thing and like watch my other friends just go to town, which is hilarious. I'll be a wingman for anyone if that's what they need. But yeah, my best groupie story comes from, again, it was me being a wingman to this little old lady at a Rolling Stones concert where I happened to be in the front row, which is awesome. And this little old lady tries to get past me and she was not going to get past me. And she took off her gold sequin bra and wanted to throw it at Mick Jagger. And I was like, this is a scene. So she throws it over, tried to get to the stage, and the bra like lands in the little moat between the barrier and the stage.
Yeah.
And the big security guy comes over and picks it up and hands it back to her. And she throws it again and falls back in the moat. He passes it back to her and says, you get one more chance. And she's totally distraught. And I look at this woman and I say, hey, do you need a hand with that? And she looks at me, would you mind? I say, okay, little old lady, I got this. So I take the bra, crumple it up, and Mick's doing his thing, strutting up and down the stage. And I wait for my moment. I throw the bra, it lands right at his feet. And I have this moment where I think I'm going to be the guy that threw the bra that tripped Mick Jagger and broke his hip and ruined the Rolling Stones. But Mick is such a pro. He does his little like rooster strut, move, dances over the bra, puts his mic back in the mic stand, dances back to the bra, picks it up, twirls it around, throws it back into the crowd. And the woman was over the moon. Oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You made my day. Oh, he has a whole collection, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, so clearly this woman had a history of, that might have been the last bra she had a chance to get to him. And yeah, so again, it wasn't like a super epic groupie move for me personally, but it was an assist.
And now it's Steve Christie's turn.
Okay, Adam, in the 1990s, the early 90s, you saw what appeared to be an obese, homeless man in sweatpants at the grocery store, bending over with his butt crack sticking out, trying to get a carton of cigarettes out of a locked case. Can you provide a little bit more detail on who that was and your impression of the situation?
Yeah, this is a classic Marin, growing up in Marin with all these famous people floating around. I was tasked with going to the grocery store to get like the last item we needed for dinner. And it was my turn and I didn't want to go. Oh, okay, I'll go. I have to go. So I went to the local grocery store and was in the express lane and there was a locked cigarette case. And there was this dude that was not looking hot. And I was like, man, this guy is a total bum, super skid, disheveled, black sweatpants, dirty running shoes. Like this guy is pathetic on his hands and knees trying to open this locked cigarette case that's clearly locked. And the checker gal comes over and is like, excuse me, sir, can I help you? And he stands up and he looks at me and I'm like, who is this guy? He's like this like mad scientist looking white haired dude. And I'm like, funny. He looks at me, he looks at my shirt and he kind of chuckles. And I realized, oh my God, that's Jerry Garcia. I can't believe the guy that's on my shirt is a bum. I thought he was a bum. And he's like, I'm standing there, I'm like 16 or 17 years old with my whatever item I had, a cauliflower or a can of tomatoes or whatever it was. I don't even remember. But I'm sitting there like my guitar hero of all time, holy, it's either him or James Hetfield. But like these guys, like my local musical hero is standing in front of me chuckling because I have his likeness on my t-shirt and I think he's a bum. And oh my God, like, holy crap. And then the checker gal comes over and he gets his cigarettes and he leaves. I'm standing there like a total idiot, just stunned in the line. Like, I cannot believe I saw Jerry Garcia in the supermarket and I thought he was a bum. But he was doing kind of bummy stuff. It was, it was a bad time for him.
It was probably the heroin
Jerry
era.
Like, it was in, spring of 95. It was in between Vegas and Shoreline. Because I went to go see The Dead a couple days later. And, he still wasn't in fine form, but at least it was in context.
Right.
So I remember being like, dude, I can't believe it. Go home and tell me, Liz, I saw Jerry Garcia at the supermarket. Oh my God, it's crazy.
While Jerry stories are always interesting to me, what I really love are party stories. And one of the most fun people I've ever met in my life is Rachael Burks. She's smart, she's funny, she's witty, a great person to go drinking with, and she's an insanely talented skier. Rachael has known Julian Carr since she was a kid, so it made sense to get Julian to ask her a party question.
Okay, Rach, number one, back in your OG Cottonwood Heights house, who did you live there with, and what's one of the wildest stories from that house and era in general?
That's the Casa de Shrednar. And I'll say, when we moved into the Casa de Shrednar, I had a 3-story 4-man hitter beer bong that we initially, we walked up to the roof to take the 3-story 4-man hitter beer bong, and we ended up realizing that there were these amazing bushes all around the house. We hadn't even, moved our furniture in, and we proceeded to have the most impressive, bush diving session ever. And so much so that there wasn't one remaining bush after that day. We hadn't even freaking moved into the house, and we had taken up every bit of powder that you could pop, the bush powder, a good area of the bush where you can land in and not hurt yourself,
Yep.
We just dove off the roof for hours. It was awesome. We all woke up with bug bites and scratches, and we also teed a ball through a window once, and I pushed Cody Barnhill down the stairs with roller skates and a helmet on through the wall.
Like the Kool-Aid Man?
Yes.
That is incredible. Yes. And
Yeah.
when you have a 3-story beer bong, because that's got to take about 6 beers, 7 beers, when someone gets that all down, does the stomach hold it or does it shoot right back out?
Dude, we have so many photos of people projectile vomiting after taking that beer bong. Oh, it's so epic. Oh, man. That was our study break. Hey, just stop by the 3-story 4-man hitter before you go study tonight. This is the best era of bad decisions. It was awesome. Actually, I've had a lot of eras of bad decisions.
Another thing that always gets me laughing is when one guest asks another guest about sleeping with their sister. This has happened more than once, but sometimes stories like this don't make the podcast. But in this case, skier Greg Hill asked Chris Rubens about how good Chris is when he's sleeping with Greg's sister.
Right early on, when you were starting to sleep with my sister, I remember chatting to her, and she kind of said you weren't really that good in bed. And I was wondering if you think that's changed since then.
So, yeah, your brother-in-law's asking you if you've gotten better at sex with his sister. Super weird.
I mean, that's just Greg in a nutshell. There's nothing offside in his family topics. Well, I mean, I'm going to be the first one to admit that I'm probably not that good. But she's quite good. And what I make up in lack of skill, I really put that effort in. That's the key. And it seems to work.
All right. So he tries hard.
Yeah. She makes me feel like I'm good at it anyway. So
that's all that matters is the way that you feel about it. I mean, if she makes you feel that you're good, you're the best. So that's great. And Greg can know that you're totally satisfying his sister in a way no other man could ever do before. So that's so cool to know. The next inappropriate question was recorded when I had some work done on my house. I needed a new roof, and I was sold by a company, and the way the guy closed the deal was telling my wife how he had had cancer, and he recovered, and he understood how getting the job done on time would be for us and our family. Well, thanks, asshole. Not only did this job take 3 full weeks to complete, it's like these guys were eating way too many weed cookies on the job, and we're still finding nails everywhere. And really, you suck, February 14th Roofing. That's not your name, but you can figure it out from there. You damaged my house, you angered my neighbors, you angered my wife, and you angered myself. And I really hope karma comes back and bites you in the ass. Sorry about my rant right there. Next up, Mountain Gazette publisher Mike Rogie asked former Powder editor Derek Taylor about his experience eating too many weed cookies. All right, well, let's jump into question number 1. It is going to be a little loud, Mike, because I have some roofers here at my house, and they're the fucking worst roofers ever. Unfortunately, I've complained so much to the roofing company. I'm so frustrated. You never hear me get this angry or frustrated, but I am today, Mike, and that is okay, because my roofers suck, and I'm going to pay them like $20,000. But let's jump into question number 1 for Derek Taylor.
Okay, DT, really glad to listen to this episode of the Powell Movement. We're going to start off with a bit of a softball. Derek, what happened when you accidentally ate a weed cookie at the Buena Vista Surf Club party in San Clemente, California?
Well, I didn't accidentally eat one. I stupidly ate 3 because I figured that would be fine.
Did you know they were weed cookies?
Yes. That was the scary thing, though, is there's kids running around and there's just these chocolate chip cookies sitting on the table. I ate one. I waited a little while. I didn't feel anything. And I'm like, well, I love cookies. I love weed. I'll just eat another one. And yeah, I ended up spending like 17 hours on the couch, in and out of sleep. And I left the party at 1 o'clock and I didn't leave the couch until 8 in the next morning.
Oh, geez. Wow. Edibles. Stay away from them.
Yeah. Careful with those things.
I'm going to guess that guys doing speed skiing events like to stay away from edibles, but I'm not sure because I didn't ask them about it. What I did do was get speed skiing legend AJ Kitt to ask a few questions to U.S. badass with the most incredible hairdo in ski racing, Chad Fleischer.
Okay, Chad, when you first got on the U.S. ski team, who did you like least? Me, Kyle, or Tommy, and why?
Oh, I like that one.
Oh, boy, that is a good question. I would say that I disliked AJ the most because I read all of his comments in the papers, and he was on the news and stuff at like U.S. Nationals, and I did not like AJ. I thought he was cocky, and I thought I was like he just deserved a good ass kicking. But then he was nice to me. He became my mentor when I made the team. So then I had to take all that back. And I was like, oh, he's not such a bad guy after all. But I would say when I first made the team, it was certainly AJ before AJ became like my mentor, my good buddy.
All right, so that's question number 1. We'll jump into question number 2.
Chad, what's the dumbest thing a random person ever said to you because of your unique hairdo? It takes more than a great haircut to be a good ski racer.
Who said that to you?
Chris Anthony said that. Chad, I hope you remember this, but in 1995 in El Colorado, we had a big rookie night. What was the skit that you were doing? Oh, boy. That was the Steamboat Sailor skit. There's a reason that tape got burned.
What's the Steamboat Sailor?
The Steamboat Sailor, like, I don't know, give me an S, give me a T. You know what? Back then, there wasn't all these hazing and different issues. All I can tell you is that I was dressed up in makeup and a G-string, and there was a reason our rookie night video got burned in the fireplace because the evidence had to be destroyed, and there's never been a rookie night since that night. That's how crazy that night was.
Colby Stevensen is also a U.S. ski teamer. But when he got on the team, hazing should have been a thing of the past. But really, there shouldn't be any hazing for a skier as talented as Colby. Be it a contest, a film part, or an online edit, whatever this kid has put out in the past 5 years has been pure gold. And Colby's lucky. If you listen to his podcast, you'll hear about his near-death experience. But in his Inappropriate Questions with gold medalist Josh Christensen, it's all about how Colby lives his life. And then fellow Olympian Lyman Courier comes in with a stony question about celebrating his Olympic silver in Beijing.
Colby, you've always been able to travel the world more or less on standby, seeing as your parents have worked in the airline industry. What is your craziest travel story or stupidest travel story while either leaving a big event or heading to a ski event?
I have a pretty good one, actually. It was between the South Korea test event, which would have been in 2016. And then we had a World Cup in Switzerland 2 weeks later. So McRae and Napes, Andrew Napes, 4x9 filmer, we went to Amsterdam. And we get to Amsterdam, we're, obviously checking out the coffee shops, like smoking some joints or whatever. Like, it was crazy just being in a place where that was like totally legal.
Yeah, when it wasn't legal here, that was a weird thing over there.
Yeah. Exploring like such an amazing place, such an old city. And then those guys like went home in between, and I just ended up staying in Amsterdam. And yeah, as far as like the travel shit, like I met this Australian dude in a bar in Amsterdam that had a apartment near St. Moritz where the competition was, and he had his car there. And so I ended up just hitching a ride with him up there. And yeah, like I remember I was in this club in Amsterdam, and I was definitely not making the best decisions at this time, but I was just kind of partying. And like I said, I kind of felt invincible at that time. This was like 6 months before my car crash. And I remember I got my wallet pickpocketed in this club. Turns out this club is open 3 days straight. So I'm up for 72 hours in this club, just like trying to get my wallet or like find it. And then someone finally returned to the front desk. And I was just like checking the front desk and just like, I didn't even know like time was going by differently. I don't know. I didn't process that it was 3 days, but I was awake for that long and then ended up going to this World Cup And I remember I was going into REM sleep. Like I missed a couple days of training. Like I missed like the first day of training. So I showed up. I just had a little bit of training. Boom, like qualified like third into finals at the Korvach World Cup. And I was like going into REM sleep while I was awake. My vision was like vibrating and I didn't know why. And I was like, what the hell? Like I'd like close my eyes and like shake it off and then it would like go away. And then I researched later, like if you're sleep deprived enough, you can actually go into REM sleep while you're awake. And yeah, that was probably my craziest story with like travel.
And you got your wallet back.
Got my wallet back. No credit cards in it was the catch.
Well, at least you got your wallet back. That's nice.
Yeah, I got it back.
And here's Lyman's question.
How'd you end up celebrating after you won your silver medal in Beijing?
Nice. So like I said, it was, at the height of COVID. We weren't able to party after events like normally. And, the whole season was just kind of like we were on edge because we couldn't like socialize and like hang out with each other. And then, yeah, it was after slopestyle. We went up and watched the aerial event and like we were having some beers or whatever. And then after that, we went back to this like other hotel. We're still in Beijing. And we had like this party in the lobby of like all these like slopestyle athletes, some aerialists. It was so sick because none of us had like celebrated together. And we were like, this is crazy. It feels like we're back to normal a little bit. And we were turning up and stuff. And it was super dope. Ended up like kissing this really cute, like Australian aerialist and stuff. And like just celebrating with all the homies. Yeah, just the whole season was just like relieved at that point. Like all the stress that we like built up and like the fear of getting COVID and like not making it to the Olympics and like all that just kind of was then flushed out. And so it was just like a really awesome moment to be like, damn, we did it, and that's how we celebrated.
While those answers were all about the celebration, Olympian and pro skier and snowboarder and telemarker Jimbo Morgan comes up next to ask Nate Holland some questions about stealing beer and bar fights.
Nate, you and I got done riding at the mountain formerly known as Squaw one day, and we were approached by a guy in a gorilla suit. What happens to a guy in a gorilla suit who cuts in front of you in the beer line and calls you a tourist at your own mountain?
There we go. Not only were we sitting on the chamois deck and this guy in the gorilla suit kind of barges in, he takes my beer, turns and walks away. I stand up and just give him a boot right to the backside. And he goes flying onto the ground. I think after that, he realized he didn't want any.
Well, that's question number one. We will jump into question number two.
Nate, back in the day, you and your brother moved out to Tahoe from Idaho. True Idaho boys. And I started hearing about you guys in the border cross world, but I also started hearing about you out at the bars. Did you ever get in any trouble out at the bars in Tahoe or Truckee?
Trouble at the bars. I like to snowboard hard and I like to party hard. So those go hand in hand. I mean, yeah, been in some bar fights.
What's the biggest bar fight that you've ever seen or been a part of?
I mean, I've never been in a full Royal Rumble or anything like that.
Okay.
But I've definitely been punched. I've punched. I don't know. It's dumb shit, dumb bar shit.
I had been working on getting Nate on the show for some time, and I was stoked to finally get him on. And I realized that it's all about persistence with these podcasts. If you try, and try again, you're eventually going to get that person that you want on the podcast. Just like someone who's working on a trick and they try again. Eventually they're going to get it. At least that's my theory with these things. For my final inappropriate question, I was going after one of the GOATs. I had Tanner Hall on the podcast, I think for like the third time. And I was able to get Wiley Miller to ask some inappropriate questions to Tanner. And I can't even remember if they were the best inappropriate questions, but I know that Tanner has no filter, so it's always great to go speak with him. And whenever I'm getting an inappropriate question from Tanner and I'm doing a best of, I'm always going to put one of his in to close these things out because he is Tanner Hall. So here we go with a Wiley Miller question for Tanner Hall.
I have an inappropriate question for Tanner, and the first thing that came to mind when Mike asked me a week ago was this trip that I did with Teton Gravity out in Stevens Pass. A lot happened that trip, but there was one night we partied, and the next morning there was a bunch of towels or maybe bed sheets or something that was used to clean up a mess, and I think Tanner might recall what happened that night, and I'm wondering if he wants to explain that in this inappropriate questions opportunity.
There we go. Question number 1. Can you explain the mess and the towels?
Dude, I'm trying to think right now and I fucking can't. I mean, I probably fucking like pissed somewhere or did something like, I can't tell you. I have no clue what happened with the towels. But I do know the truth talking about, and him and his homies came and picked me up from the airport, and I was tripping my face off on a bunch of mushrooms and stuff. And I was young, dude. Like, I think I was 15 years old then.
You were tripping your face off on a plane?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Yeah, it was the craziest shit. That was the only time I did that. I ate mushrooms like well before getting on the plane, like 3 hours before it. I show up to fucking security and TSA and I was like, holy shit, here we go. But like still so young and like had a great time, was able to navigate it, no problem. Had nothing on my brain to stress me out. So at that point it was lit.
All right, well, that's question number 1. We'll jump into his question number 2.
Okay, for my next inappropriate question for Tanner, this one's more recent. We were up shooting in Montana, and we got to this super amazing zone in the morning. Tanner had some plans to set up a jump. I wanted to go ski a line. Ed, the filmer we were working with that day, Ed Clem, one of the best in the business. We went to go shoot this line with Tanner to work on his jump. And we were really just around the corner from each other. But Ed and I's plan to ski this line ended up taking 3 times longer than it should have. Tanner was left kind of stranded without his snowmobile up on this ridge line to freeze his ass off. And rightfully so, was upset with Ed and I when we got back. Tanner attempted to take off, go back to the truck, call it a day. Ed and I had been fucking acting like kooks up there, and it was time for Tanner to bail on us. Understandably so. So my question to Tanner is, when you tried to leave, why were you not able to get back to the truck? Love you, bro.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah, because I just got all heated, right? And I'm terrible, like, with directions to zones. Like, get me on my skis and shit, I can find myself, my way down lines and stuff. But finding these zones out in the middle of the goddamn nowhere with all these logging roads everywhere, I easily lose my way. And Wiley's like a goddamn topo map to begin with when you're out in the mountains with him. So, yep, I got really frustrated. I'm not going to lie, I got pissed. And I was like, I'm going to go fucking smoke a spliff at the truck, calm down. And then when I'm trying to leave, I took a wrong turn somewhere and just find myself all dickered out of nowhere. And finally made it to cell phone service and hit those dudes up and was like, dude, how the fuck do I get out of here? And came back and got me and I got out of there.
So that was the best of Inappropriate Questions. And I really love this segment. But over the years, it's really gotten watered down. I used to really put people on the spot when my guest question asker didn't get inappropriate enough. And I'm going to have to get back into doing that as we move into ski season. And ski season is right around the corner. And I will say that during the summer, you've heard a lot of bike, you've heard X Games, you've heard events, you've heard a whole bunch of different things on the podcast. But starting September, the first week of September, I'll launch new ski and snowboard episodes, and it's exactly what you're expecting from the Powell Movement. You'll get that snow-focused content. I'll have a badass lineup of guests, and I'll create some more great interviews for your listening pleasure. Until then, please review me wherever you listen, tell a friend about the show, and finally, please, please, please support my incredible sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Liquid Force. Have a great week, everyone.